Hi there. Today I'm taking a look at a classic wine from Western Australia, from the Margaret River region, and this is Chateau Xanadu's 2013 Cabernet Sauvignon. Xanadu, a producer that I think is probably slightly underrated, actually. One of the pioneers of the Western Australian, of Margaret River's region in Western Australia. Dr John Lagan started his winery, started planting vines there in 1977. So, you know, one of the first people to really invest in the region. And yet these days, when you think about the top quality wines, perhaps you think about Cullen's, Lewin, Vassar Felix, Mosswood. Xanadu, not always in there, but perhaps unjustified. So firstly, they've got some nice old vines, and you know, this wine is made very carefully. It's made in small batches, fermenting in open fermenters. About a third of it had an extended maceration to make sure that you're getting extract plenty of tannin from the skins and the pips of the wine, of the grapes, and then aging in French oak in barrique, so small barrel, 40% of that being new. So really, you know, just giving a refined oak note to it. The Margaret River region itself, a region with lovely sunshine hours, nice warm region, but cooled by currents coming up from the Antarctic Ocean there, and giving it a climate that is very similar to Bordeaux. In fact, in some ways slightly favourable to Bordeaux. I don't think they get quite as much rain as they do in Bordeaux. So a really good region for growing Cabernet Sauvignon. So let's see if the wine lives up to what I'm saying. Firstly, let's look at the colour there. Very classically ruby red, darkly pigmented, pretty deep. I can see through it. It's not opaque, but it's not far off it. And looking at it, as I say, coming up to being a 10-year-old wine, and it's not really browning at the rim. It's holding its colour very well there. There's none of the blue purple note that it might have had when it was younger. Swirling it, it's throwing some reasonable legs into the glass there, but then it's 14% alcohol, and being Cabernet Sauvignon, you'd expect it to have reasonable tannin, especially that extended maceration we were talking about for a portion of it. And let's have a look at the nose. Oh gosh, that's a really sort of vivid nose in a number of ways. You've got several elements there. You've got a sort of a minty eucalypt note that's very typically Australian. You've got quite clear black fruit, lifted cassis, that slightly leafy note on cassis. I'd say cassis rather than black currant. I think of black currant as being more sort of ripe and curranty. This slightly more sort of sharp and leafy. And then there are hints of cedar, but also quite classically in a Bordeaux sort of style, sort of graphite notes coming through from the oak there as well. So yes, plenty going on in the nose. It's got a reasonable intensity, but it's not a huge ebullient nose of juicy fruit or anything, but you know, restrained elegance on the nose, I guess. So let's have a taste. Tasting it, the wine has a lovely freshness. The black curranty notes coming through, and more black curranty actually, sort of juicy fruit. That sort of slight leafiness, but a nice acidic cut coming through at the same time. Behind that, there are notes of cedar, maybe a tiny bit of cinnamon spice, that sort of thing there, but also the graphite notes. It is very much along the sort of line you'd expect to see from Bordeaux, except for those sort of slight minty eucalypt top notes that you've still got on the fruit on the palate. At the finish, the acidity is keeping the fruit going quite nicely. The alcohol, although it's 14%, is not actually making the finish hot and closing up the fruit. In fact, if anything, the fruit goes on as a sort of that cassis towards the end, and then gains more of a sort of a graphite, slightly cedarwood note on the finish. Not particularly drying, but just lengthening it out to a very fine finish there. So yeah, I think that that's a really classy wine. I do think Xanadu can sometimes be underestimated, and looking at an assessment of its maturity, I think that's a wine that's drinking beautifully now. As I say, it's 9.5, 10 years old. But I'd be happy to keep that for another 5 or 6 years, and it would still be very much at this stage, and it would probably age for up to 10 years. So yes, Chateau Xanadu 2013 Cabernet Sauvignon. Thank you very much for joining us. Hope you found it interesting, and do watch again. Bye now.